Welcome to the Obi Rideshare Podcast. This week, our special guest is none other than Payam Safa, CEO and founder of Obi. Let's take it away.
So, Payam, can you tell us the light bulb moment when you first thought of Obi?
Yeah, so actually, prior to Obi, we were Bellhop, which was a concierge app, or we call it concierge app, where we were aggregating services across transportation, food, and entertainment services and distributing that through Airbnb hosts and hotels. And the idea was to aggregate across all these services and kind of have more than one integration or supplier within each of these verticals. And that's when Lyft approached us and said, we want to be aggregated alongside Uber, which was the moment when we decided that we should really go all in on the aggregation of ride companies, taxi companies, and all the big ride shares. And that's when we invested all in and decided to build Obi and an app that focuses on transportation.
What first made you think of the concierge product in the first place?
Yeah, so I started to see a trend where there were a lot of apps being developed in the marketplace across these three verticals. So whenever I was traveling, whether it was in Southeast Asia or somewhere in Europe, I would see that there's multiple apps, for example, for food delivery or rides or entertainment options, and it was always a headache to figure out which apps were available in each market. And so I sensed a need for myself as a traveler that there should be a platform that could tell me all these things in one place, and not just tell me which ones are available, but also be able to browse, shop, compare, and book directly within one app.
Cool. So can you sum up in a few lines or sentences exactly what Obi / Bellhop does as an app?
Yeah, so it works very similarly to how you're used to using an Uber or Lyft app. When you open it, you input your pickup and destination address. And from there, you're going to see all the ride options across all the ride providers, which means all the taxis, all the Ubers and Lyft options, all the other black card companies that most consumers are unaware of. You'll see all of those side by side in a simple list view. And from there, you're usually comparing on either the price or the time. So you could sort it based on cheapest or fastest. And then you select which ride option is best for you in that moment. And then from there, you can continue to either book direct, where the entire experience from the driver coming to pick you up, take you to your destination is all happening within Obi. Or we'll send you directly to the Uber app. We'll pre-populate the pickup address, destination address, and the ride type for you, and you'll only have to click the book button. So it's always a seamless experience for the user.
So it also sounds like, as well as a price comparison app, you're also a discovery app in terms of giving people the ability to discover new ride providers when they may only be used to using, one or two, like Uber or Lyft. Can you tell us a bit more about the smaller players in this market?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned, there's kind of two main use cases. There's people who are living in a particular city, let's say New York, where, as you mentioned, they might be used to using or even comparing Uber and Lyft, but, they might not be used to using the taxi apps like Curb or Arrow, or many of the other black car services like a Carmel, or there's 270 ride companies that we've actually aggregated and have an exclusivity with. So these other 270 companies have an app, they have some technology, but consumers aren't going to download 270 other apps to figure out which one might be best or compared to the Uber and Lyft. So we've done all that hard work and brought it all into this one app so users can easily compare across all these other options. And then there's the second model, which is you're traveling. Now, if you're traveling, people still, as of today, know that Uber works in many cities around the world, but they're not going to know what that number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other options are. And a lot of times, Uber is probably going to be the more expensive options. In most cases, it is. and it might not even be the fastest option. So by giving the user access to these other available ride providers in markets when you're traveling gives users the ability to really find the best option for them.
That's incredible. 270 plus providers in New York City alone that most people haven't heard of. What's your guess in terms of globally how many of these smaller unknown sort of ride companies are out there?
It's at least tens of thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands. The ride industry or the ground transportation industry, where like the traditional taxi industry is larger than the airline industry, and it's more commoditized. It's easier to build a fleet of vehicles than it is a fleet of airlines or airplanes. And so as a result, there's many more of these different companies. Now they're going to be on smaller scale because it's easier. You could have a company with 100 vehicles as opposed to 100 airplanes. So there's tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 of these companies around the world.
Wow, that's impressive. What's been your biggest obstacle or challenge since you've started Bellhop and now subsequently Obi?
Yeah, it's really it's getting consumer awareness at a large scale, right? With any consumer product, it really works when you have hundreds of thousands or millions of users. For us, we've been limited on our marketing budget and so we've been kind of honing in on the product market fit, getting users to not just download the app, but retain them and then continue to use it repetitively over time. And those are the key metrics that investors want to see before they start investing larger sums of money on marketing. And that's kind of the tipping point that we're at now.
You're essentially creating a new habits for people, aren't you, in terms of what your platform does? You're creating a new psychology and a new philosophy for people to do something they haven't done before.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's right, Nick. So there is a consumer shift in behavior that needs to occur. A lot of people might be used to using just Uber, and maybe there's a smaller subset that could be used to using Uber and Lyft and comparing the two. And so that there's definitely a shift in how people are used to using those apps and switching their behavior to using Obi. And there is a psychological barrier there for us that we need to tap into, and we're getting better at it. But at the same time, that shift is also happening because of the understanding that there are other alternatives out there, and that the pricing and the timing of how long they have to wait to get an Uber or Lyft has also changed. And since those companies have gone public, the pricing has gone up tremendously over the past maybe double or so in the last year and a half. And so consumers are willing to shop more, and that's why now is actually a perfect time for us to kind of be a momentum builder as a part of that shift.
And that kind of transgresses quite well into a follow-up question I had in terms of how the pandemic has affected Obi. So basically what you're saying is it's helped in terms of commoditizing rides and making people more aware that there's other options out there because of the wait times, because of the price increases. And we've all seen the many headlines out there of $1,500 Uber or Lyft rides to the airport costing more than the actual plane ticket itself. So how has the pandemic affected sort of Obi's business?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of two parts to that. Initially, it absolutely rocked us and hurt because early on in the pandemic, people were just stopped moving around. There was quarantine laws in place across the world, and of course in every major city, which is where we're operating in now. So we took a huge plunge in just our general usage. However, as you mentioned, that's also shifted the fact that these, ride hail apps are commodities, and there are other alternatives. And we've been able to strike deals with some of these major players that, need help and want to push back and have a great service that, they can offer consumers, and they don't have a strong distribution channel to reach the consumer, which is where we help. So So as a result, the end of the day, it kind of, it hurt us, and just like it did many other transportation or travel company in the world. But on the back end of it, and kind of now and moving forward, it's been a big shift in momentum and change in consumer behavior, as we've talked about. So it's a net positive for us and moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Do you think these higher prices are here to stay?
I think there's always going to be ups and downs. So, there's higher prices, but there's alternatives that are cheaper, right? So there's going to be an equilibrium kind of in the market as time goes on. It won't, I think the average won't be as high as it is now, but it's definitely not going to be subsidized pricing during this kind of golden era where Uber and Lyft had 25 billion in venture capital to spend over 10 years to subsidize the cost of those prices. So it won't be as low as it was. I don't think it'll be as high as it is now either. It'll reach some equilibrium state that's higher than what it was, but maybe a little bit lower than it is now.
How technically challenging is Obi? Is it quite simple to do what you do, or is it has it taken years and years of technical developments and skill sets?
It's definitely the latter. It's not easy to build a technology platform that works globally and also is able to pull real-time pricing with accuracy for the user, because people care about the accuracy in real time, and that's not something easy to build. So it's a minimum of 2 years, I'd say, to build the kind of platform that we have and make it work.
Okay, cool. And how big is your technical team?
We're still quite small. So, we're about, 3 full-time and 2 part-time right now.
How do you see autonomous cars playing into the rideshare mix in the future?
Yeah, great question. Autonomous is definitely going to be another kind of big component of what our value proposition is, and actually feeds into the commoditization and the fragmentation in the market, right? Again, Google with Waymo, Amazon with Zoox, GM with Cruise, and a handful of other autonomous ride-hail platforms coming to market. These are players that currently don't have mass distribution, and they're new supply, right? These are new vehicles, a completely new business model. And so that's going to be more apps that consumers are going to need to compare, and is just going to, of course, change the landscape. It's going and it's going to help us grow because it's other alternatives that consumers are going to want to compare, and we'll have that available within Obi.
How do you think multimodal will evolve? We've seen a lot of headlines over the last few years of bikes and scooters. Some cities love them, some cities hate them. How do you see this whole multimodal, which has been a very kind of key word and very trendy word the last few years? How do you see that evolving? And do you think companies like Uber will really become the Amazon of transportation, as they've quoted that they would like to become?
When it comes to kind of us and multimodal, there's it's a great trend, right? Reducing cars or helping alleviate the increase in cars when it comes to the bike shares and the scooter shares and the moped shares. It is kind of great for mobility, and it's definitely here to stay, and there's still a lot of growth to be seen within the micro mobility market. And there will be some cities and some consumers that are going to want to compare how to get from A to B across different modes. Now, I think still most people are going to know if they want a car or if they're going to be willing to take a bike or a scooter in the moment they're making a decision. But there will be an intersection of users that care about, actually, I don't care which one of those 2 modes I take, whether it's a car or a bike or a scooter, and they're going to want the ability to compare. And a platform like ours will be able to give that seamless experience to not just compare, but also compare the time and price easily. So that opportunity is definitely there, and we are looking at that as we continue to expand.
I guess that follows quite nicely on to, I was going to ask about your vision for Obi. Obviously, right now, we just talked about multimodal, talked about, sort of your current plans. Where do you see the company going in the next 5 to 10 years? What's your vision for Obi?
Yeah, so right now we're you have a city by city rollout strategy. So, there's New York, which is our headquarters. That's obviously where we have a lot of focus. And then there's, kind of, the next 10 cities that we're thinking about from there. A short list like London and Paris and Moscow and Mexico City, Sydney, Melbourne. There's a lot of there's a lot of cities out there that have the commoditization of the ride providers and a significant amount of fragmentation that's already happened and will continue to happen. We're seeing those trends year over year. So definitely kind of continuing to expand city by city in the next couple years, while also expanding into the the multimodal elements and micro mobility as we've talked about. And also the autonomous and building those out, and also continue to building our machine learning intelligence. So we've been doing a lot of R&D on things around price predictions, where consumers can be informed about how the pricing is changing over time. So for example, we'll say, hey Nick, if you wait an additional 4 minutes, you could save 90% on this ride. So you'll be given that kind of information to make a decision if you want to wait or book now because of those trends. So it's exciting. There's a lot of B2B2C distribution that we could be doing, giving our APIs and the fact that we have exclusivity with some companies. So giving the ability to distribute the supply that we're aggregating and integrating into other companies like Google or Apple or other mobility players. So it's a lot of excitement ahead for us as we continue to grow.
That's really exciting. Let's take a quick sidestep. You talked a lot about savings over the last few minutes. What's the typical variance that an average consumer could see, or not see by not comparing prices? I mean, are we talking like $1? Are we talking $50? What kind of savings could a consumer make? And I'm also curious, like, as a ride share expert yourself, I'm sure you take many rides across the world. I'm curious if you have a rough idea of how much money you've saved.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So in terms of the savings themselves, pre-pandemic, when rides were still being subsidized, a typical savings at any given moment by using Obi could be around 25%. Right now, with the pricing that we said, they've skyrocketed up. There's no longer these subsidized rides, at least in markets like New York. That savings is up to 50% on a ride. And the average ride price right now is $30-$40. So it of course depends on the frequency, but it's definitely in the thousands of dollars, low thousands of dollars a year is a savings potential.
That's not insignificant, definitely. Yeah. So you must have saved tens of thousands of dollars yourself using Bellhop and Obi over the years.
Oh, I'd say that's accurate.
Oh wow. So I mean, obviously, you're a skilled entrepreneur. You've built up Bellhop and Obi. You've built a team up. Do you have any advice for budding entrepreneurs and people currently looking to start up their own businesses, having been through what you've been through?
Yeah, I think it's really having a few kind of key ingredients. One is love and passion. You really have to deeply love and be aligned mission-wise with whatever it is that you're building and working on. An alignment meaning the core values and mission of the company have to be very deeply ingrained and aligned within you as a person. So that's where the love part is, because there's going to be ups and downs and sideways turns, and it's not going to be easy. And you need to remain true to yourself and kind of why you started, and have that resiliency baked in there. One is, and then the second thing is that it needs to also be catering to your strengths. So you have to know where your strengths are and be optimizing and leveraging those strengths to the maximum capability while it is building whatever it is that you're working on. If you have to go outside of your kind of core strengths to work on something, even though you might love it, it's going to be more difficult. I'm not saying that you can't do it. It's just going to be more difficult. And there's probably something that you could find where you also love and it's aligned with your strengths. Um, and then it's, kind of having a team and having support and people around you that can help you take that to the next level. So you kind of have to have that, 3 kind of core ingredients to, I think, be ready to take this journey on.
Some really good advice there. So thank you so much indeed for your, insights. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners before we close the podcast?
We actually just, successfully hit our maximum goal on Republic, a crowdfunding site. We are raising a financing round. Actually, we just kicked that off a couple weeks ago, and we're closing that by the end of this year, 2021. So I'd say, if anybody has any intros or any leads or any interest in having a conversation, I'd say don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is payam@rideobi.com. You can reach out to me there and happy to answer any questions or have any conversations around investment interest. And I appreciate your time, Nick, for having this conversation, asking the brilliant questions. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Payam, very much indeed.